Okay, sixth graders, back again, and today we're going to be looking at slope and rates of change. By the end of this lesson, you want to be able to determine the slope of a line and also to recognize a constant and variable rates of change. So first, we should probably discuss what slope actually is. Slope is the measure of the steepness of a line. All right, a couple things to note about slope is that it's always written as a ratio of what we call rise over run. And it's always read from left to right. So for example, a positive slope would go uphill from left to right, and a negative slope would go downhill from left to right. So now you go ahead and pause the video and see if you can label the three graphs below. Okay, on our first one, as we go left to right, you'll notice that the line is slanting down. So this would be a negative slope. All right, on our next one, you notice that we're going uphill as we move left to right, and this would be a positive slope. And this next one, which kind of just looks like flat ground, there's no slope to it, would be a zero slope, because the measure of its slope would be 0. So knowing how to identify positive and negative slope is only part of the situation. We also can actually determine the slope of the line, which means we're going to be looking for the ratio of the rise to the run. Okay, so it's a fraction of rise over run. What we're going to do is, when you're looking at a line, now I know on your copies it probably didn't show up super well, but we're going to look at these grid lines and we want to find where the line crosses the graph at a point of intersection. So for example, there's a point here, and there's also a point right here. So our first point, reading left to right, is 0, -2. And then our second point that we're using is 3, 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to read our rise to our run. So how much is the line going up, and how much is it running or going horizontally from left to right. So when I do that, I'm going to start at my first point. I'm just going to count how many it would take to get up to our next point. So in this case, if I was to draw it out, we're going to be 1, 2 steps up. So our rise is 2, and then our run is 1, 2, 3, because it's over 3. So our rise is 2, our run is 3, so our slope is 2/3. Right? Our next one, I'm just going to identify 2 points again. So say we use the point 0, 2, and then our second point is 1, 0. On this problem, we're going down 2, so we're not actually going up. So our slope would be a -2 because we went down to get to our next point. And then I went over 1, so it'd be -2 over 1, which we could also just write as -2. Next thing is what a constant rate of change is. So if something's constant, it stays the same during equal intervals. So it's kind of like back when we were looking at linear function, we were seeing that common pattern that it's always increasing by the same amount. A variable rate of change means that we see changes of different amounts during the same intervals. So you go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out which of these would be a constant rate of change and which one do you think would be a variable rate of change. So if we're thinking about slope of rise versus run, slope is going to be constant, right? Because no matter what points I picked up here, the slope should be the same. So if I went, you know, from just different points, we should see that same slope between our points. Whereas here on this first one, see how it curves? So you don't see that line or that linear function. This would be a variable rate of change. Whereas here with the line, how it stays the same and it's increasing by the same amount, this would be a constant rate of change. So overall, why is it important to understand slope? Well, slope can actually help us graph lines. If we know the line slope and one of the points on the line, we can graph the slope. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the point that's given. So in our first one, our point is negative 2, 3. So I'm going to go ahead and graph that point, which means I'm going to go down 2 and over 3. Now our slope is 2, but remember it's rise over run. So since it's a positive 2, in this case it's 2 over, and since they don't give us a denominator, it's just a whole number, it goes over 1. So what I'm going to do is from our point, I'm going to count up 1, 2 steps, and then I'm going to go over 1 and graph a point. And I'm going to go up 2, over 1, and I can keep doing that because it's going to be a constant rate of change. And then all I need to do is go ahead and draw a line between all of my points. So now what I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do the next problem on your own. Alright, so remember we're going to start by graphing our point 0, negative 2, which means your point should be right there. Since our slope is 1 over 4, our rise is 1, which means we're going to go up 1 for every 4 to the right that we go. And we'll go up 1 over 4. Up 1, 4. So if you notice, I'm actually kind of off the graph on this one, and that's okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw my line between my points. Ideally, obviously, you could use a ruler when doing this and stuff too, especially if you're doing it on paper to keep it more accurate.